Friday throughout the NFL season. I'm Dave Lochran. With me, Chris Spags, to do our Wednesday, September 4th edition of the show. But here's the thing, Chris, I don't know we've ever done a show, just the two of us, since I've been at Awesomo.
Yeah, we've had a couple extra people in the room, but no, this is one-on-one. We're finally getting a little intimate, which is all I've wanted. But it's funny though, because yesterday you did the show with Sal, and one of the guys on the premium Slack hit me up and was like, "Yeah, it seemed like you didn't really like that take by Sal." And I'm like, "What?" And it took me a second to realize, like, oh, he just thinks that we're white guys with backwards hats and we're the same. That's life. That's life here at the Awesomo YouTube channel.
That's good stuff. Well, yeah, it's you and me today, Chris Spags, Dave Lochran, and we've got a lot to talk about. The guys, you know, the brass over there at Awesomo were willing and able to get us all, ownership projections this morning, which is awesome. So we've got the ownership projections. If you are a subscriber at Awesomo.com, you want to go ahead and pull them up, follow along with us when we get into it. That works. Otherwise, we're going to discuss them. We're going to give you a first look at what we have for ownership. And Spags, I'll tell you right out of the gate, we know that. And you have to be cognizant of this. They're going to change throughout the week. Like NFL projections always change throughout the week. That's what makes good ownership projections, is being able to adjust them, and you will see that. But the first look is always really interesting because certain players might pop that you didn't expect, and certain guys, one specifically that I thought would be a lot higher projected own, is a lot lower. So we can get into all of that on today's show.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him a little bit on the air. Let's tease it a little. We'll be professional broadcasting men because we both are. I think that's our rep here at the Awesomo channel. We're both the hosts who do all the hosting type things.
Right.
Let's draw it out. Let's really make them earn it. But yeah, there's one dude who was coming up a lot with our projections at Awesomo.com, and I was shocked that he was as low as he is. But some other guys who I do feel like are getting ownership that I wouldn't have thought were getting as much. Like, I'll spoil this one, McCaffrey. I'm a little surprised he's as high as he is. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one, and I think we should go through. But should we do the big plug for our new landing page?
Oh, it is a beautiful landing page.
Just a quick one. I know it's not on the run sheet. I don't want to deviate too much.
No deviation at all. No, hit it.
Yeah, so we got the new landing page here on Awesomo.com/join. If you're a person who's been watching a lot of the YouTube shows and a person who's tuning into the NFL strategy show right now, we have a lot more information on there now. And we also have a new package. It's our Express package, which is coming out there. There's a lot of details on the page itself. So if you want to get down, see the difference between the Express package and the regular packages out there. But basically, we're making it a little simpler now for people who just want to do like NFL. You just want to get Awesomo's grades, jump in there, want to get some of the basic numbers that you need to have to make lineups without digging as deep as some of the guys out there. We obviously have a bunch of them on the channel, including Lofty and myself and Josh and Jake and all the other guys, Adam, of course. We're doing the Fantasy Cruncher thing, but if you want to keep it simple, the Express package is going to be the way to do it. Let's go check it out right now. There's a really good landing page. It's fancy. Our designer, Jared, our designer / programmer, Jared, put it together. And it's a great job at Awesomo.com/join. I'll put the link in there right now. But there are some price points there, including as low as $3.95 a week. So a lot of people out there who don't want to make the big investment, now you can jump in there and do that a little less. And, we've been doing these shows so long, Lofty, like people just want to be able to get in and get a little taste. We want to be like the dealer on the corner giving it to them. So now we can finally do that.
There you go. Get them hooked, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's hit on some news first, and then we'll get into some of this ownership discussion. We also got some really interesting stats that you pulled up for today's show. We're calling it Beyond the Numbers. We'll get into later in the show. A few really fascinating numbers that, you know what? They might mean something. They might not mean anything. And that's what we're here to talk about. But first, Ezekiel Elliott. It's done, man. Ezekiel Elliott's got it locked in. He becomes the highest paid running back in the National Football League. I don't see this. Look, I'm not a big pay running backs guy, but if there was any running back that deserved to get paid what he wanted, it was certainly going to be Ezekiel Elliott. This Dallas Cowboys team would probably have been all right, at least through the first 3 weeks without him. And people argued, actually, I saw this on Twitter. They said if Jerry Jones was smart, he would have just waited through 3 weeks when they face the Giants at home, the Redskins, and then the Dolphins at home, get them up to a 3-0 start with Pollard, and then you have all the leverage in the world. But maybe they just wanted to do the right thing with Ezekiel Elliott, who just signed a 6-year extension, $90 million, $50 million guaranteed. It's a monster contract extension, and he should be on the field for week 1.
This is something I don't talk about often. I'm actually a Cowboys fan, even though I grew up in New York. I had a thing which turned out to be Freudian, which I didn't realize at the time, but I picked the teams that my dad didn't like because I thought it'd be like a fun rooting interest thing when I was 5. And so I'm a Cowboys fan, and I have to say, like, I think with the sense I've gotten this entire offseason is that Jerry just wants to pay these guys. He wants to keep them happy and going because, like, they do have a Super Bowl contending team. I know it doesn't seem like it. I know the Cowboys have been the joke since I can't remember when they were good when I was little, but I can remember them being terrible and me getting mocked for liking Tony Romo and Drew Hutchinson and all these other various assholes they've thrown out there. But I do think there's one Bill Barnwell tweet I saw this morning, which I thought was pretty good. And he said the following can all be true. Zeke is better than an average running back. The difference between Zeke and an average running back behind the Dallas line isn't worth the difference in salary. And Zeke will probably be productive enough for the Cowboys to be happy with the extension. I think that's it. I mean, you have a guy who's like getting 25 touches a game. I think it's sort of like usage rate in the NBA where there are only so many backs can kind of hold up to that sort of load. Even if they take a little bit off with Pollard, like he's still doing 20 touches a game and really highly effective for them. I don't want to see that much money going. I get the NFL cap experts would give you a different take on it where they're like, hey, save that money, get a cheap quarterback in there. Don't overpay Dak. But you just got to if these are your guys and you think they're good enough, you just got to ride with them at a certain point.
We're a DFS show, but where would you draft Ezekiel Elliott right now? Because I can imagine that he'd be going in some spots first overall based solely on that workload. And the fact that, you know what, as good as Saquon Barkley is, as involved as he is in the passing game, he's playing on a really bad football team that's going to be playing from behind more often than not. Would you consider Zeke number 1 overall?
I think he has to be. So I did an auction draft last night, which like the news was swirling around, but it kind of seemed like that fake.
It was imminent.
Yeah. So it was, I did it at it was 9 p.m. East Coast time, 6 p.m. my time. And so the news was out, but it wasn't fully there where they were talking about the numbers, but it didn't seem like it may happen for week 1 for sure. And a guy got him in my league. One guy paid 71 for Saquon Barkley. I got McCaffrey for 63. Zeke went for 45. I mean, that's probably a 1-day window of time where that was the case, but I would take him number 1 right now, I think. I mean, he may not be in great shape for week 1, but the reports are that he's been working out in Cabo, as I'm sure Zeke, but really putting a lot of dedication in down there in Cabo. But but it's like he's ready. Like he's been in shape. I mean, you've seen him out there. We've seen him shirtless doing things across the country. So he's in good shape. I would hope he's ready to go, but I would take him number 1.
By the way, I can't tell you how many comments I see in chat. Like this one from I Am Me. Made it. Damn work meeting trying to keep me from watching Awesomo's broadcast. I love it, man. The dedication is a beautiful thing, and we're happy to have all of you guys with us today. One more piece of news. Not that it means a whole lot, but Jared Goff signed a monster contract. Is it worth it?
I would say no overall, but he's been kind of the perfect puppet for Sean McVay overall, where so there were some numbers. He was a guy who actually just missed the cut on our fun little number segment we're going to do. So he was terrible last year when he got pressured, like in a really appreciable way. He had a 59-
look against the Eagles, that one game. I am an Eagles fan, so it's a little bit biased, but they got to him early and often, and he looked like an entirely different quarterback than he did earlier in the year. You're right.
He's like, so I know him a little bit. I know of him a little bit. I've never met him personally, but he was like a big Barstool fan. That's a place that I worked, and I'm familiar with him a little bit. And the buzz on the street, which again, this is just, secondhand people who've hung out with him a little, not a smart guy, but a guy who's like pretty like up on things and he pays attention to things. And I think that's sort of it. When he's prepped, when Sean McVay is in his head, it's all clear, it's laid out. Like just look, so the QB rating for him, actually, I'll give you a guess. So here's his QB rating when it's a clean pocket. 117.1 QB rating, 78.8% clean accuracy. So that's a PFF stat, one of their premium stats over there. Go check it out if you want to get a package of that because they also are really valuable. But Lofty, guess what his QB rating is when he gets pressured?
63.
59.8. So about half as good as he is.
God, wait, say that again?
59.8 QB rating, 63% accuracy. So he drops off a cliff. It's a 50-point drop in QB rating.
Yeah, it's incredible. I wonder if Cooper Kupp will make a difference, though, having someone a little bit closer to make some average depth of some short yardage targets more easy, more accessible. I don't know though. That's a pretty brutal number, and you're right. Now, granted, he's had a line that's held up for him for the most part, and one of the best run blocking lines, so it's been pretty easy just to pull that safety valve, right? But yeah, I think you make a good point. I guess the question is, how many other quarterbacks are terrible under pressure too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even like Tom Brady drops off a cliff when he's under pressure. But I think when you have a guy who's that big of a split, like there's one guy we're going to talk about now. We're teasing so much. We are such whores for teasing. But there's one guy who jumped out who actually had a better rating in a dirty pocket than a clean pocket that I was shocked by. So I think there are some guys who kind of are a reverse splits guy if you've been following MLB season. But yeah, it's strange because like you would assume there's a drop off, but a 60 point drop off for QB rating is a pretty appreciable, and it could be a bit of bad luck too. But I agree. I think having Cooper Kupp in there, that's a big one. Like Cooper Kupp was a monster last year, and he's apparently faster now, which doesn't seem like that should be a possible thing.
So we have ownership here now. I'm telling you, some of this will surprise you. And we're going to get into some of our top guys right now based on this first look. I mean, it's a first iteration. I don't know how much it'll change. Assumption is that it'll change quite a bit. But looking at what we've got as far as ownership goes, not going to give it all away. You want 50% off your first month of all access Awesomo Plus subscription. Just use the sign-up code Deeper Dive. And like Spag said, check out that beautiful landing page. Deeper Dive will get you 50% off your first month as Deeper Dive, all one word.
Deeper Dive, NFL strategy.
Oh, dude.
Don't take away my referral credits.
Maybe you need the host today. I'll tell you what, the two things I struggle with the most, yesterday I was like, so Andrew Luck, before he got injured, is the second most expensive pitcher on the slate.
He would not be a good pitcher right with that shoulder.
Unless it's his off well, it's not. No, that would be a brutal outing for him. I don't think he could throw the first pitch at a baseball game. But yeah, the crossover for me is tough. NFL strategy. It is one word, however. NFL strategy will get you 50% off your first month. If you use Deeper Dive, it would work too. It would just credit me and not Spags.
They'll be like, this guy Spags getting no referrals. What's going on?
All right.
Yeah, it is a great package to go check out. But yeah, I think you're making a point that I cut off, but keep going.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say is when you look at ownership, you and I have already gotten a glance at it. We're going to kind of explore it on the show together with the viewers. Like we haven't dug deep into it yet. And I didn't want to. I wanted to go over it as we went forward with the show. But we teased it earlier. If there was one player that stood out to me as significantly lower owned than I anticipated. Now, this is a guy that when I crunched 500 lineups and just sorted them simply by projected fantasy points, I got 65% of him. That is Leonard Fournette. On DraftKings specifically, $6,100, 15.7% projected ownership right now for Leonard Fournette. Even at the running back position alone, he is coming in much, much lower than I thought. There are 5 running backs projected for more ownership than Leonard Fournette. You have to think that changes, right?
Yeah, I mean, so he projects really well for us at Awesomo. I know our projections that we have, which are straight from Awesomo himself. So if you want to get in there, again, go to that awesomo.com/join link, not trying to do another plug. But yeah, we're using the same projections, I presume. And I got him at the exact same amount too. And that's with having some stacks and stuff going. So trying to split it a little, I didn't really figure too much. But he does project really well. It makes sense why he would too, going against Kansas City. Team really defensively offered nothing last year. And theoretically also going to have to score some points. He also was involved in the passing game. And he's looked motivated. So I was shocked by that. Definitely still going to have some ownership on him. But I would imagine, in my gut, I was going to think he was going to be in the 30% range, at least where the number one running back is. And we could talk about that too. Dalvin Cook, I'll spoil it. The highest owned running back corner projections right now. And I figured he'd be a little bit more than Cook, like those guys in the same price range. And maybe that makes him a pivot to Cook now, which makes him possibly more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few guys in that price range that stand out, right? I think we could get into a few of these guys that you look at and you say, okay, it makes sense that these players are going to have some ownership. Leonard Fournette, I think he will come up, but as of now, he's getting around 15%. Still one of the highest projected guys, but not exactly where I thought. Dalvin Cook, as you pointed out, right now projected for the highest ownership, not only at the running back position, but on the slate overall. And I guess the question to you is, are we discrediting this Atlanta defense a little bit too much now that they're at least getting a little bit healthy, or at least healthier than they were last season? They did give up a lot of fantasy points, a lot of yards to running backs, but it is a different version of the defense than we saw last year when they got gashed day in and day out. But Dalvin Cook's still at a very reasonable price point. What do you see here for Dalvin Cook? And do you see him essentially taking all of the workload from this backfield?
So I don't know that it'll take all the workload, but this is one of our points of contention in the articles we did earlier in the year. And I think this is where there's a bit of a discrepancy between the people who've really been following the kind of the rumors and whispers throughout the offseason and the people who haven't. Because I think Dalvin Cook, the hype has been that Gary Kubiak, they brought him in because they want to run more. Down the stretch, Kirk Cousins passing dropped off of a cliff. I think the last 5 games. I don't have those numbers in front of me. But basically just stop passing as much. They were trying to run more. And Dalvin, he's not a healthy back, but for week 1, you're going to assume he's going to be as healthy as he's going to be generally. So I think Madison's going to take some touches away. I think it's hard to believe that he wouldn't, but I think Cook's a 20 touch running back. I mean, he was at 4.4 targets, 12.1 attempts last year. So that's about 16.5. You tack another 4 or 5 on there. Also, we have different running backs in there. So one would assume he siphons up a little bit more touches. So I'm okay with it. I think your point about the defense, though, is fair. Atlanta's defense last year, rushing wise, according to PFF's grades, was not that bad. They had a 76 run defense grade, which is pretty much middle of the road. But I think that Minnesota's really going to come out and run the ball down their guts. And I think, too, I don't think that Adam Thielen should have the ownership that he has right now, because he's one of those guys who really suffered from that kind of drop off of the pass game. And he's projected for about 15% ownership. And that, to me, is one of my week 1 fades.
Yeah, well, you and I collaborated on a Sleepers Bust and Breakout article at Awesomo.com. It's free. And one of the things that you pointed out in that article was when we did wide receivers, that you could see Adam Thielen and Stefan Diggs. I don't like using the word being busts, right? But in a sense, underwhelming from where they finished last season. And not out producing their ADP or matching their ADP, which is, 3rd round for Thielen, a little bit later for Diggs, but both of them are up there. So on this week 1 slate, again, going up against an Atlanta team, their secondary got hammered last season. I mean, that was certainly worse than the run game. There's no question there. But you've got Adam Thielen right now at 15.4%. There are only a handful of wide receivers garnering more ownership than he is. And Stefan Diggs is also up around 12%, in the top 10 at his position. What is it about them this week that you don't like, or is it more of a seasonal thing?
I mean, it is a seasonal thing, but I think overall they're just priced in a spot. I mean, actually, I think their prices are kind of fair, but I just don't see them getting almost 10 targets a game each this year. That was a lot. I mean, that puts them both in the top 10 receivers in terms of targets overall. And that's just not, I don't think that's sustainable. And I don't think they want to do that. I think that was part of the discrepancy last year when there were some changes made by Mike Zimmer. And I just think they want to run the ball a lot more. They have a good defense. There's really no reason to be airing it out as much as they are. So I think they're going to try to squeeze the air out of the ball this year. I think Dalvin's a big beneficiary. Obviously, Dalvin's had a history of hamstring issues, various ailments. So Alex Madison could come in there and be a valuable guy. But yeah, I just that's so much volume. And I think it's a spot where they were just kind of had some weird games last year early on, and they just realized our strength is probably running it down people's faces. And I think that's what they're going to try to do the most this year.
Yeah, 606 pass attempts for Kirk Cousins last year. From a fantasy standpoint, he wasn't bad. He threw for 30 touchdowns, 4,300 yards. It was a pretty strong season from Kirk Cousins. But the question is, like you said, is that what they want again? Do they want another 600 plus pass attempts for him? I have to think that would not be the case, especially given that Dalvin Cook was sidelined for a number of games last season. But I do think, though, regardless of whether you like them or not, it's not even I think. It's I know, and we'll see it, further cement itself as we go closer to Sunday. Minnesota is going to be one of, if not the most popular team on the slate when you take running back, wide receiver, Kirk Cousins not getting a ton of ownership, but throw him into the mix as well. I would expect this to be the most, if not one of the most popular teams overall in week 1.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think honestly, in Dalvin's case, I would say that's pretty well deserved. He's at a good price. There's also PFF grades too that I highlight on my matchup sheet. His elusiveness rating was 82 last year, which is one of the better numbers in the entire league. So if we're talking him getting some extra touches, either in the short pass game or the handoff game, I mean, that's a shot for him to actually break big plays. He also had a pretty good breakaway rating of a 38.1, which is I would say a little bit on the higher end for a running back. So, I mean, if you're adding volume to him and you're giving him this shot, I'm okay with the 25% ownership on him. But yeah, for me, I'm very down on the Thielen and Diggs ownership, and they're going to be chalky. I'd rather just kind of go with it. But it seems to me, based on the ownership we have, I imagine there's going to be a lot of overstacking in Minnesota. So I think taking one or two pieces might be the move.
Yeti Express in YouTube chat says Vikings will cruise against Atlanta. Easiest bet of the week, Minnesota -4. You with it?
I would not say easy. The easiest bet of the week is Baltimore at Miami, I would think, by pretty much any margin I would do. But but yeah, like Atlanta's scary, man. Matt Ryan, so this is another one that jumped out to me. He was really good last year, like shockingly good. He got so much crap for that offense, but he and Julio Jones had the most yards per route in the league out of guys who actually had a bunch of targets. He was behind a couple of guys. He had 2.9 yards per route last year, which is a very high metric for Julio. And even though the red zone stuff was an issue for him early in the year, people just kind of making that an issue, finally regressed. He actually ended up with a decent touchdown rate overall. So I think Atlanta's really good. I think the Minnesota defense is also really good, but I don't think it's an easy one. I think they're going to have to earn this, and I think they're going to have to earn it by kind of keeping the ball away from Atlanta.
All right, staying with the running back position, Austin Eckler right now projected as the second highest running back behind Dalvin Cook and the second highest player also behind Dalvin Cook at 23%. And by the way, we'll get into a little bit of Yahoo later on here because some of the prices are absurd and you need to pounce on them in these monster contests that I will get to momentarily. Austin Eckler, though, 5,500 against Indy, a team that is now completely hamstrung with the loss of Andrew Luck, but maybe Frank Wright and the offensive brilliance of his can at least make them a somewhat respectable offense. It's tough. I'm trying to find the silver lining here, though, Spags. And I think if there's any silver lining to find, it has to rest with Frank Reich. So will this game be competitive? I don't know, but I can tell you this much. I was very surprised that Andrew Luck's retirement did not move the line more than it actually did. I thought it should have moved the line significantly more than it did. That wasn't the case. Right now, the Indianapolis Colts, let me pull it up here, because I think they opened at 4-point dogs? Let's see. The Colts were 3-point dogs, and now it's 6.5. So
that's a big jump.
It is a big jump, but in football, you're a quarterback. I mean, an Andrew Luck type quarterback, I would almost think would be worth more than that, given the fact that they might struggle to move the ball a lot. And I guess that'll put it in Austin Eckler's hands. What do you think? It sure seems the field is on him.
So I do believe in Indianapolis a little more. I think Frank Reich's one of the better coaches in the league in terms of just what he brought to Philly, what he took away from Philly when he left, I think was pretty obvious with their kind of flirtation with other guys running that offense.
Well, their offense struggled. Man, look, their offense last season, they made the playoffs. They snuck in as a wild card. They beat the Bears on a shanked field or a blocked field goal. But their offensive production was down precipitously from 2017. And I think Frank Reich played a big role in that happening.
Yeah, so to me, I think he can find ways to make it work. It's one thing that jumped out to me too with the Colts. They played at the league's fastest pace last year, 26.3 seconds per play. And I think he does kind of find ways, like Frank Reich finds ways to put these guys in successful spots. Last year, Andrew Luck didn't throw it deep because he didn't have the confidence in the shoulder. They did a good job kind of making him a check down guy, making him a West Coast offense guy. And that was not his MO earlier in his career. And I think that's sort of what Frank Reich brings to the table. He's going to put guys in a position to succeed. And also, too, they have a Super Bowl roster. Like, they built this team to make it the Super Bowl this year. Jacoby Brissett, I mean, they gave him a big contract too. Another guy who got that extension. I think they have some faith in him. And I think Jacoby Brissett, I drafted him in our Awesomo Celeb League, ended up dropping him 2 days after to get a running back. But, look, it was a flirtation between me and Jacoby. Didn't work out. He tried. So you got to try and make things work as best you can. But I don't think he's a guy.
It's a two-way street.
Yes, exactly. But I think he's a good player. Like, I think he's not a great quarterback. He's not Andrew Luck by any stretch. He's more mobile. He can get out there. He has had flashes of good games. I mean, he wasn't great that year that he was starting for them, but that team was a disaster. Now they actually have defense. They have offense. It's got a ton of weapons. You got Paris Campbell in there now too, who's a really elite burner. You have him going across from T.Y. Hilton. You have Funchess, who's at least a big body. Maybe might not be in the rotation forever, but he's a guy who is at least theoretically capable of doing something. Marlon Mack too is back. Naheem Hines is back. This is a good team. So I think they can kind of rise with them. The Eckler part though, I'm a little skeptical on Eckler because we saw what they did with Justin Jackson down the stretch last year where what guy was going to carry that load? That was Jackson. Eckler's a good pass catcher. Eckler's a small back. He can't carry, like we talked about with Zeke, you can't carry that big load. So I'm more inclined to get away from Eckler this week. I think he's a fine play. I'll certainly have some, but I wouldn't go crazy over the field on him personally.
No, listen, I'm with you, man. I was surprised by this. And if Eckler was priced like pre-Melvin, if they didn't preemptively price Austin Eckler up in the event that Melvin Gordon didn't play, right, then I'd be all over it because we'd be getting him at like 4,000. But at 5,500, here's a simple way to break it down. I think it's always good to put these things in context. Dalvin Cook is $500 more than Leonard Fournette on DraftKings. To me, that's absurd. Leonard Fournette is $600 more. Eckler's $5,500. Cook is $6K. Fournette's $6,100. Nick Chubb is $6,400. Like, these guys are not separated much at all from Eckler. Eckler on Yahoo is $18. $18. Take a look at some of these other guys, and you'll learn very quickly that there is good value there. Leonard Fournette's $20 on Yahoo. Even if Fournette does end up being chalkier, let's say perfect, dream world scenario right now. We're in fantasy utopia. Leonard Fournette at that price on Yahoo and on DraftKings, currently getting significantly less ownership than Austin Eckler. It is the most no-brain decision of the week. Am I wrong?
No, I agree. I mean, just the fact that it's going to be a split backfield. Also, Fantasy Utopia, that's just Awesomo's DraftKings and Fanduel handles. Just hanging out in there, just cashing it out before he realizes would be my utopia. But yeah, no, I'm with you, man. Like, I think it's going to be a split backfield. I really think Justin Jackson is a threat to take carries. I'm not ruling out that Melvin Gordon, you see Zeke get this contract. He's not getting a Zeke contract, but maybe that motivates them to get him in there. And then who knows if that could happen. But there's just enough wrinkles in there where I'm not dying to get to Eckler, and I just don't think he can carry the volume. But he does project really well for us. So Awesomo is a believer, it seems. But I just think Justin Jackson takes enough off the table where I'd much rather have Fournette, much rather have Cook. These guys are going to have really big roles and better matchups. As somebody, I want to give the credit, but somebody pointing out in the chat, Thomas Tyner, one of our guys who's a regular, Evan Silva put out a tweet about the Chargers line being awful. That is a thing with the PFF grades that does back out too. They were a really bad pass blocking team last year, a worse run blocking team last year. It's not a great Chargers offensive line. Obviously, that's been a problem for them for years now. And it seemed like it got better, but I guess maybe not as much on a grading standpoint or from people who are actually watching all the game film and checking all the O-line movements. But I don't think it's a perfect spot. And we talked about the Indy defense too. 3.9 yards per rush allowed by them last year, which is not a perfect stat, but it's a low number. It's a low number by the Indy D. So I'm not sold on Eckler, and I'd much rather go to the other guys.
I watched a lot of Colts last year. I don't know why. I probably, we watch a lot of all games. It's a whole lot easier to watch almost every football game than it is baseball. The Colts were markedly improved on that line, on that defensive line last year. I mean, given what we expected that team to be and what they weren't perfect. But like you said, this was a very competitive football team, a team this year that had clearly, I think they had like top 8 odds to win the Super Bowl. So it's a huge loss. And maybe the reason they are only 6.5 and not 10-point road dogs is because the defense is decent. But quite frankly, I hope Melvin Gordon doesn't play, because if Austin Eckler is going to be around 24% owned, that is I will happily look elsewhere. And I've already named a couple of those guys. Then you've got, though, like Chris Carson and similarly priced guys. Chris Carson, Kerryon Johnson against Arizona, Melvin Gordon, Devontae Freeman, a bunch of guys that haven't really caught on or really generated much hype. But for week one, outside of Carson, right now we've got Carson projected around 18.5% at 5,700. I think it makes sense. They should pound the football. And then meanwhile, Devontae Freeman at like 5%, Kerryon Johnson at all the way down. Actually, no, Kerryon's at 13.5% too. I think one thing we're finding here, Spags, it is going to be the week of mid-range running backs on DraftKings, and I think on Yahoo too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those, I think as Awesomo would say, a pay up to be contrarian week, where if you do go to McCaffrey, I mean, we'll see how Zeke affects things in terms of his ownership, because I think that's certainly going to pull some away as well. And I think it's really something, as Lofty mentioned earlier in the show, the ownership projections change a lot throughout the course of the week. They get more accurate as we go because there's more data out there, more kind of media things to pull in, more information to kind of build them in a more accurate way. And I would not be surprised to see it change a little bit in that respect, but still, I think the value there may be a thing where people are just too afraid to pass up, a big Cook day, a big Fournette day that's equivalent to what Zeke or what McCaffrey can do. Like, I think McCaffrey's ownership is going to drop. I find it hard to believe that he's going to stay at over 20% with Zeke in there because they're both in that same price point. I think it's a really interesting thing to watch. And I think this could be one, like week 1, week 2, week 3. Those are really the weeks you have edges in the NFL where if you've been paying attention, you kind of are looking very closely at things. And I think if people are going to run away from McCaffrey or run away from Zeke and are going to go to Cook and Fournette, like I like those guys, but it's hard to say they have the upside of Zeke or McCaffrey personally.
Yeah, man. And McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley are at 23% and 19% respectively right now. Ezekiel Elliott, we do have him in the ownership projections at 7.7%, but you've got to believe that's going to change. Spags, I wouldn't be surprised if all three of these guys came in around like 15% or so. Maybe less Barkley, but if I had to make a call right now, you ask me, okay, cash lineup, or you're throwing a single bullet in the $100 tournament, single entry, and you need to make the call on you're playing a top RB. Who's it going to be? How can I not play Ezekiel Elliott given the projected game script here? Like, everything just seems to fit him so perfectly in a spot where now you got paid. You're good. Like Le'Veon Bell said this season, doing an interview with, I believe it was Steve Smith, senior, of course. He said, now that I got paid, you can give me 400 touches and I don't care. Like, I'll do whatever I need to do. You have to assume Zeke feels the same way, and you have to assume that they're going to get everything they can out of him, starting with week 1. Like you said, he's been in shape. He's been conditioned. I mean, against the Giants, how does he not blow up here?
The way he doesn't blow up is they limit his workload because he's just getting back in there. He hasn't been taking hits. I mean, even if he's in great condition, there is a difference between taking hits over and over again, running into that line.
Yeah.
So that's one way I could see him failing. Like, honestly, if I had to pick one, my guy would be McCaffrey because I think he's the safest out of all of them. I also will talk about in our stats corner, but there's some stuff with Cam Newton that concerns me quite a bit. I think which is also going to benefit McCaffrey. But I think Zeke coming in, maybe getting like high teens touches, and then Tony Pollard, like, and they're just in the lead. Don't need Zeke to be out there kind of pushing himself. I could see that happening. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a good day. Doesn't mean he's not worthwhile if he becomes being chalky play. But it does mean to me, like, maybe they don't need him quite as much in week 1, like you mentioned, for the reasons why they could have held him out and not given him that contract. I think if you kind of just like slowly ingratiate him, slowly get him back in the mix, give Tony Pollard a look, see what he can do a little bit for 10 touches a game, 8 to 10, let's say. I think that's sort of a move I would want to do. But it's also going to be a different offense with Kellen Moore in there. So I think that's a factor to consider where Zeke could just get a bunch of touches in the flat, just a lot of catches. And that could kind of change the equation too, in a way where anything could happen with Zeke this weekend. It wouldn't shock me.
You know what? You're right. Although I'll tell you this much, let's say those concerns kind of resonate throughout the industry and Zeke comes in at like 6% ownership on the final run. I will definitely have some Ezekiel Elliott if he's coming in at 20% less than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, right now we have him at 8%, and that's with, I think the news having come out yesterday, so that should go throughout the week. And I think that's a fair number to me. Like, I think a split with McCaffrey and Zeke is a move. And I think it all depends on where this value shakes out. If people end up going to the higher price guys, I think I'll have a little bit more of the value guys. If people end up going to the value guys, I'll go to the higher price guys. That's sort of the way you have to look at NFL DFS tournaments. We saw that approach work out a lot last year in Millionaire Maker lineups, where I remember one week in particular where McCaffrey had like 38 points and he was 5% owned. Like, you have to have these guys sometimes who have that gigantic upside and just kind of, don't get enough ownership for whatever reason.
All right.
Should we talk Matt Breida, by the way, real fast? Because he's a guy who jumped out for ownership price. Yeah, so Breida, 4K. He's on the unofficial depth chart as a starter. And we have the ownership. Let me just double check real fast. I think we have him at under 10. He's not on my sheet because it's stupid. I did my sheet differently this year, and I'm a little thrown for a loop by it. But he is going to be projected pretty low overall. And I think that's a guy at 4K at 5% projected ownership right now in DraftKings, going against Tampa Bay in a game that we're expecting to be high scoring. That's a dude who I feel like could pick up ownership throughout the week. And if he doesn't, I want double the field, maybe triple, maybe quadruple the field on Matt Breida, because I think he's kind of nasty. Even if Tevin Coleman takes some stuff away, Breida's a better pass catcher. He's a little more dynamic of a back. I like Breida a lot. How do you feel about him?
Look, the fact that Jerick McKinnon is now done for the year might seem like it's not important, but I do think it's important because, I mean, here, I say a lot of times you can figure out, you can gauge you can get the pulse on a DFS slate, or for week one at least, by looking at what happened in a lot of seasonal drafts. And people were waiting on Tevin Coleman and waiting on Breida because there was a third body here. There was Jerick McKinnon. Granted, all of the injuries and the lack of production in the past. If you remember, McKinnon was the clear-cut starter last season before he went down with the ACL, right? Like, this guy was supposed to get the large majority of work. But now he's out. He needs another surgery on his knee. And now we sit here with Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida. Tevin Coleman is $5K on Draftkings. Matt Breida is $4K flat. On Yahoo, Tevin Coleman is 20. That's, in my opinion, way too much. Matt Breida is 14. Pretty reasonable. Give me the guy. Let me ask you this. If there was one guy in this backfield that could shoulder a heavier load week in and week out and do enough with it. Mind you, Breida was hurt like literally every game last year.
He was very graham crackery last year.
Yeah, amazing. But don't you think Breida is more of I'm not saying he will be, but more of a 3-down type back than a guy like Tevin Coleman?
I mean, look, Atlanta didn't give Tevin Coleman a fair shake, I don't think, because Freeman came up and was such a beast where they had to give him more touches. So I don't want to fully write off Tevin Coleman. What about
last year?
Well, yeah, sure. You're right. Actually, I forgot that he did have a chance.
He had almost the whole season.
Yeah, they didn't lean on him as much as you would think, though. I guess given the investment in him over time, like, I didn't feel like they gave him a fair shot. They got Ito Smith in the mix. Like, it didn't seem like they really wanted him to kind of carry a lot of the load. So maybe San Francisco feels differently, but I agree. Like, you have Breida, who's been in this offense for a year. He had really good success last year. He had 10.9 yards per catch, which he wasn't like a big target guy, but the Niners over and over again kind of showed attention to try to like get the ball into space. That's why George Kittle kept getting all those breakaway touchdowns, because they just like to get guys moving horizontally rather, and getting them out there. So that's going to help Breida too. If he's the pass catching back, I think that's a big asset. But I think at the price points and the ownership discrepancies, like you mentioned on Yahoo, that's a really big difference. Even on DraftKings, I mean, that $1,000 can open up a lot for you. So I would much rather have Breida. But again, if the ownership shifts too much and people are like, oh, Coleman sucks and he comes down, then it's probably time to go to Coleman. That's what I hate about DFS, though. It's like, I love Breida, but I can see the logic why you might shift back to Coleman.
And I want to be very fair to Tevin Coleman. He averaged 4.8 yards per carry last season. Granted, it was on like 164 attempts, nothing crazy, but enough to get a good idea. Yards after contact per attempt, he was 12th in the league. Not bad. Actually, he was right up there with Christian McCaffrey and James Conner. So I don't want to shortchange Tevin Coleman's abilities as a running back, because I think he was good last season. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that Matt Breida is a formidable back and should get a lot of work. Tevin Coleman, one thing that stands out, I get your quick take on this, then we'll talk a little receivers and get into our beyond the numbers. Tevin Coleman last year, and I try and always preface this with, you and I like the PFF stats. Pro Football Focus has some really great stuff, but they're all just many pieces to a puzzle. It's not one stat and then, oh, I don't like this guy because of one stat. When they all add up, then you've got something. Tevin Coleman avoided tackles last season was 17. The only two players worse than him, LeGarrette Blount and Matt Breida.
Oh, come on. It's funny because I looked at the elusiveness grades, and yeah, they're the same grade for both guys, for Breida and Coleman. So, that is funny. So just a couple guys who can't miss tackles. That's fun. Good to have in your backfield.
Right. Yeah, except Breida's got a little bit of size to just barrel through them. We'll leave it at this. Give me the cheaper guy in this situation. I think just give me the value against it. I think this game should see a lot of points because neither defense is all that imposing, particularly Tampa Bay, which is what I want to talk about next. If there's one team this season that so many people have just put their eggs all in that basket, it's got to be the Bucs, man. Right? Like Mike Evans, obviously, I love him this season, but he's not getting the hype compared to Chris Godwin, who is being drafted at his ceiling. I love him. I think there's a ton of voided targets with Humphreys and Deshaun Jackson, and Winston's going to throw a lot. Bruce Arians should accommodate that. but we haven't seen it yet. And we haven't seen Chris or OJ Howard do it yet. The advanced metrics on him are phenomenal, but we haven't seen it yet. Going into this week against San Francisco, Chris Godwin has ownership right now projected at 17.7%, third highest and tied with Julio Jones. Mike Evans is down at 10%, and OJ Howard, I believe, is 8.9%, while Jameis Winston, I want to get all of these to you. Jameis Winston is at 10%, but Chris Godwin, it wasn't just a seasonal thing, Spags. It's week 1 too, man.
And he's priced too. I mean, look, there's been a lot of hype about him. We talked a little bit about the kind of training camp rumors and whispers and all that. Christopher Harris, one of our guys, is doing our Awesomo Celeb League, talks about it a lot. I think he calls it like farts and whistles or whatever. And whenever the coach speak kind of comes out. And I think there's a lot of things that they've said about Bruce Arians said about feeding Chris Godwin the ball, treating him as a higher targeted player. The winds seem to be blowing towards him, maybe getting more targets than Mike Evans, even though Mike Evans is a little more of a deep ball guy. Look, I buy the hype at 6,200 though, and he's going to be really chalky. That doesn't seem the best. And I'm going to throw it out there. I know we have our run sheets, our segments, but one wide receiver 3, I like quite a bit at 1% ownership. Rashad Perriman, I think, could be the guy here who could end up being like, let's say the Bucs disappoint somehow and the touchdowns go to Peyton Barber and Rashad Perriman. Doesn't that seem like a thing that would happen in DFS where like the Bucs are super chalky in week 1?
Absolutely.
Rashad Perriman has a 2-touchdown, 100-yard game.
Absolutely. And you could tell you're a host because you set me up for a beautiful segue there, Spags.
This is a fun show. This is like Federer and Nadal going teeing up teases and shit.
That's great. So you mentioned Rashad Perriman. I was a huge Perriman truther, and I ate shit on that. Okay. And I can fully admit it. It did not end well for me. I'm talking about when he was in Baltimore, he doesn't play a season. He comes back. I feel great about it. They didn't have really any bodies there to be completely worried about. And he possibly had the worst season a wide receiver could ever have. All right. Mm-hmm. It was that bad. Now you've got Rashad Perriman in Tampa Bay. Like I said, no more Humphreys, no more Djax. Rashad Perriman right now, $3,300. On Yahoo, Perriman is coming in at $12. And on Fanduel, Perriman, not to say you don't necessarily need him here, but he's $4,800. For those of you that don't play a lot on Fanduel, minimum salary there for a wide receiver is $4,500. So he's very close to minimum salary everywhere. What are your thoughts on Perriman in a game where, like you said, everyone else is going to be on everyone else on this Tampa Bay Bucs team, particularly Chris Godwin?
I mean, look, so I do the show on the contrary with Awesomo. Last year we did with Evan Silva. This year we're having a rotating third host. So
very excited for that.
Yeah, no, get that plug in real fast too. But yeah, so like Perriman to me is, and it might be me thinking too contrarian and trying to find those angles. So Perriman last year, and this is a really weird stat, which would have been good in our kind of beyond the numbers segment. But so there, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So okay, the top 10 receivers coming in at number. I mean, this also includes tight ends and running backs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th best yards per route in the league last year was Rashad Perriman, 2.5 yards per route. Granted, he didn't run as many routes for the Browns. Granted, Baker Mayfield is a better deep ball thrower than Jameis Winston is, but we're assuming Jameis Winston is going to be a better deep ball passer this year. Perriman is the deep ball threat there. Mike Evans is one too, but Perriman's actually fast. He had a deep catch rate too. That was pretty crazy. He had let's see, what was that rate? A 50% deep catch rate, which doesn't sound that great, but that is like an actually good number for a guy who's getting downfield, and that's catches over 20 plus yards. So if he gets more targets, he had 1 target per game over 20 plus yards last year. He gets, let's say, 3 in that offense, and there's a lot left behind with no Humphreys in there and no Deshaun Jackson. That could be like a big game. Like that could be 4 catches for 100 yards. And it wouldn't shock me at all.
Dude, you're not wrong. Now, just everyone should know, everyone that's watching, know that when we talk about these guys, we're looking for bottom of the barrel, 1% owned players that could make a difference and could allow you to get, comfortably the Christian McCaffrey or the Saquon Barkley pairing with Julio Jones, right? But I think one way to look at this too is if you're stacking the Bucs and you wanted to go like Winston and 2 receivers, going Winston, Evans, Perriman, who right now he's entrenched. He is the number 3 wide receiver on this team, right? You're not just hoping he gets 15 snaps off the bench.
Right.
He is their number 3. I think one way to stack this team and do it unique in a unique fashion would be to get somebody like Perriman in there and pair him with the Winston and with the Mike Evans. So you're still got a lot of exposure to this game that's expected to see a lot of scoring, but maybe you don't have the chalkiest options like Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I think that was something I was listening to, I think Adam Levitan's podcast, the DFS Edge one. He did an interview with Chris Raybon from the Action Network. And, look, I don't know if we're supposed to name competitors, but I think they do a good job on that show. So whatever. And we like Levitan. But I think like he mentioned something about there where if you have a cheap receiver there and you stack him with a quarterback, like that's sort of the move there is where you want to have that cheap receiver kind of be the one that's propping up the quarterback's numbers. And I think this is a spot where Jameis is going to have some ownership on him, but not as crazy of an ownership as I would have thought. And I think this is a spot where if you go to Perriman, and you're right, if it's a 2-man stack, or if it's just Winston and you get 2 higher price guys, or 2 guys at the price point of Godwin and Evans, just who you think can outperform them, I think that's a really nice move. And I think that's one that tournaments are, look, it's week 1, any little tournament edge you can get. I think Perriman at 1% ownership, have yourself 2%, have yourself 3%, whatever risk tolerance you have. That's a move I'm going to be doing, probably more than that, a stupid amount. That's what I'll be doing it.
For sure. So, I talked with Sal Vetri and I were on yesterday, kicking off this season's first NFL strategy show. He'll be back with me tomorrow. And then Manny Laura and Chris Randone are going to carry you out of the work week and into the weekend on Friday. I got some really interesting stats for you here that I researched a little bit further after yesterday's show when I brought up Albert Wilson. Now, Albert Wilson, I liked Albert Wilson, and by liked Albert Wilson, I mean, I was drafting this guy in like NFFC and draft leagues in like the 16th through 18th round, because why not? Before the Tunsil and Kenny Stills trade. But check this out, man. I know it's against Baltimore, and that's what concerned me yesterday when we're taking a preliminary look at this. But one thing that stood out, and I mean stood out in a big way, is this. Albert Wilson played only 7 games last year. He was 10th in avoided tackles in the league among every single wide receiver. That's crazy. Here's another one for you. Yards after catch per reception. Dante Pettis was second in football with 7.9 yards after catch per reception. Albert Wilson had 13.3 and led the league. Granted, I know he had a couple of those where he caught it at the line of scrimmage and took off, but he did it more than once. I think this guy is a very interesting, I don't want to say gadget receiver, but Albert Wilson to me is one of these players who can break off for really big numbers and kind of do it out of nowhere because he doesn't need a lot of room to roam. $3,900 on DraftKings right now, and the ownership we've got on Albert Wilson is coming in at 5%. So not a 1% Perriman, but I think based on how little options they have in Miami, they might look to get him involved pretty early in this one.
Yeah, now you also have a quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick. You talked about the gadget plays, the ones that are kind of up close, but Wilson does get some deep targets as well. I mean, he did his air yards per target were on the lower end because of those kind of at the scrimmage line kind of targets there. But I think he is a guy who can take it deep. And if he does get it deep, I agree. We talked about the yards per route number, 3 yards per route for Wilson last year. He also had 5.3 targets per game, which is a little bit higher than I expected because you kind of perceive him as one of those gadget guys. Like
right.
Harriman last year was a 3 target per game guy. Like Wilson at 5 this year, he could go up to 7 to 8. I mean, I don't know that he can kind of do as much with that many targets, but I agree for week 1, especially in a guy in Fitzpatrick who we know likes throwing deep. He loved throwing deep last year. He's the only guy on the team. I mean, Devontae Parker can do some stuff too, but like Wilson's actually talented. I think Parker's been kind of up and down. I like Wilson quite a bit. And I think at that price too, another cheap receiver there. That's another wide receiver who I think would be under that 4K range on DraftKings that I'm really into.
Do you have any other lower owned guys that stand out to you? I know one guy that Awesomo, Alex Baker, really likes, well, the projections, I should say, like is Joe Mixon. I'll be completely upfront with you. This scares the hell out of me. And I definitely worry that just based on the line, based on the lack of weapons, and based on the fact that they're likely going to be playing from behind, Joe Mixon scares me to death, as good as he is and as much as I like him in general.
Mixon to me was undervalued in season long this year. But I agree with you. Like, I don't think the Seattle defense is the defense of old. And, maybe Cincinnati, having Zach Taylor in there, he's a young mind. Maybe he can kind of do some things with this offense that we don't see. But not having AJ Green out there, we kind of saw that offense stagnated last year with no AJ Green. It kind of sucked the life out of everybody. Joe Mixon still had a couple decent weeks, but this isn't as good of a matchup on paper for it. I don't hate it. He does project, as you mentioned, projects really well according to Awesomo. One of the better value plays on the slate, even though he is higher priced, and he's going to be under 5% owned. So I agree there is some theoretical value there, but the low total, Seattle, maybe just putting the boots to him and kind of just squeezing the air out of the ball as they did like to do a lot last year. That does seem like a pretty potent combination that would definitely limit Mixon's value. And Bernard too, getting a contract that they gave him a big extension, which didn't make sense to me. There's a lot of risk, I think, for Mixon this week where the game just gets away from him, but he's talented. I'll have him in future weeks, but I agree for week one, I don't know that I'm as on board totally.
Yeah, and there's it's definitely not the same Seattle defense as it was in the past. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems like a daunting task for Mixon here, especially given how the game's projected to go. Any other cheap guys here, low-owned guys or tight ends that stand out to you that are getting lower ownership?
I didn't take a great look at tight end because we just got these right before we came on the air. Kittle, to me, at under 10% is one that intrigues me. They've talked a little bit about stifling his workload a bit, and a tight end at 10% is not, I would say, low owned per se. But I do think he's a guy who has a lot of upside again still. One of the better breakaway players in the league, one of the better yards per route run players in the league last year. Garoppolo coming back from the ACL injury, maybe he's not as good of a mix last year as Mullins was, but I think it's a spot I like George Kittle. I like this year a lot paying up for tight end because I'm really not as sold. I know Hunter Henry's going to pick up some ownership this week. A lot of these other cheap guys are going to pick up some ownership at tight end. And I'm not quite as sold on that approach overall because I think the higher price guys are the ones who really the only ones you can bank on target wise. So your Travis Kelce's, your George Kittle's, I think those guys, I value them more than it seems like the field will.
Do you not think that a healthy Hunter Henry, and I know you and I actually disagreed on this doing the tight ends article over there, the breakouts, busts, and sleepers. What is it about Henry that concerns you? I'll give you my take quickly and then let you respond.
Sure.
Antonio Gates no longer being in this offense, I think it makes a huge difference. Just the touchdown counts alone in the first 2 years that Hunter Henry was there, he was getting in the end zone quite a bit, but so was Antonio Gates. And he certainly was still siphoning off a lot of that potential production, those snaps and targets. But Phillip Rivers does lean on his tight ends when he has a good one. And Gates is no longer there. Melvin Gordon likely isn't going to play. And as much as I think Eckler and Justin Jackson will be able to, admirably fill in, they're not Melvin Gordon. So basically it's what? Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Hunter Henry. So tell me what it is about Henry at this price point specifically that you're not huge on.
So I think the price is great. The ownership is what's going to scare me away. We have him over 15% right now. I think that could possibly be on the rise. And just frankly, the fact I think they're going to need to keep him in the block. We talked about that line being kind of crappy. Last year, a big reason the Chargers were a little bit better was they had Virgil Green in, who's actually a decent pass-catching tight end, not a guy who's ever had a big load, but over the course of years has kind of done a good job with the targets he's had, a nice high catch rate. So he's a guy they just didn't use at all. And I was kind of bullish on him because I thought the same thing where it's Gates is getting old, no Hunter Henry. There'll be targets there. Combined, these guys had 4 targets per game last year. It's not the best spot on paper. I agree he'll favor Henry a little more. And I think relative to those kind of tier 2 tight ends, the under OJ Howard guys, I think that's fine. I have no problem with it. But I just think they're going to use him a little bit of a different way. He'll still be a red zone target. But I think when you need these guys in there, and also, frankly, having Gordon out, I think is going to favor other catches going in the flat to Eckler more than it will go to Henry. So to me, I think there's enough reasons to kind of look elsewhere. But at that price, it's hard to argue it. I just it's a lot of ownership for a guy who's a cheap tight end when you have high volume guys are going to get volume.
Fair enough. Awesomo.com/join. Check out the ownership projections because we can't go through all of them. The player projections, you can get all of that. And as Spags mentioned earlier, we're even doing weekly passes now with a lot of great stuff. We don't have a ton of time for me to go through everything here, but if you go to awesomo.com/join, you can see everything that we offer. A beautiful breakdown. So you feel comfortable when you finally do pull the trigger on a subscription. NFL Strategy is the sign-up code. And for anyone that wasn't here yesterday, I should let you know that we are doing a monster giveaway here at awesomo.com. That's right, you can win 1 year of NFL Awesomo Plus subscription by retweeting, liking, and replying to the tweet at Awesomo_com and Awesomo NFL, the pin tweet. Respond with the total number of passing yards Aaron Rodgers throws tomorrow on Thursday Night Football against the Bears. It's a $249 value. Literally all you have to do is retweet, like, and reply. You'll see the tweet at the Awesomo_com handle, and follow Awesomo_com and follow at Awesomo NFL. Retweet, like, reply. You got to do it before September 5th. And we're going to pick 2 random winners from the finalists on September 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern. So essentially, you could get the answer perfectly right and still lose. It doesn't really matter. But you could be off by 200 yards and win. That's what's so beautiful about this. So check it out. Head over there. And good luck to all of you. Okay, Spags, let's do it, man. Beyond the numbers.
Yeah, here we go.
Beyond the numbers.
We got segments here, boys.
That's right. That's right. Baltimore Ravens pace.
Yeah.
Last season. Well, you know what? Let me throw it to you. The question basically you and I discussed it a little bit before the show. We were coming up with some ideas. And I had seen you mention this before, actually. The pace of play for the Baltimore Ravens was, what, 0.1 less second? Was it 0.1 less seconds than for third place in the league last year? The Colts, as you mentioned, led the league at 26.3 seconds per play. But Baltimore was 26.9 in 2018. Is that surprising to you? And does it make a difference with how you evaluate Lamar Jackson and this football team as a whole?
So I think it does. So one thing that's, I wouldn't say baffled me, but been interesting is how much Alex has been on Lamar Jackson with his season-long projections, with some of his projections this week. And I think it's one of those where I'm a Josh Allen guy. It's sort of a similar logic with Josh Allen, where he runs the ball, he throws the ball deep. He's either hitting home runs or he's getting you singles, and there's not a lot of in between. And I think it's the same thing with Lamar Jackson. If he has any sort of regression as a passer, he's going to be a much better player from a fantasy perspective. And the fact they're running the clock that fast, my gut instinct on why they're doing that is they don't want the defense to get settled. So if he's going to run, it's like, oh, they're still trying to figure it out. They're confused by the motion. And then Lamar can squeeze out a few extra yards. But I think if they're keeping that pace going, that's a pretty big advantage against the Miami team who sucks. The time of possession, too, for the Ravens at 32-27 was the highest in the league last year. It's a big chunk of time for Lamar to be possessing the ball against the Miami team who sucks. Like, again, just there's no reason to think they're going to be good this year. Maybe Brian Flores is going to do some magic. He's got some Patriots magic in him, but they got rid of their best guys. They've gotten rid of their worst guys. They got rid of everybody. So it's just, I think it's a really nice spot. I think the pace is going to help them out, but it's hard to say, though, how much pace matters. I just think it's a really nice spot for Lamar overall this year and this week in particular.
Dude, it is a really good spot. I saw a few people in chat actually mention that Lamar Jackson could be one of the bigger busts this week. And I'm not even going to argue that it's possible, because what he does with his arm, what he's capable of doing with his arm this season is still yet to be seen. I do think, though, that his floor is pretty high, given the matchup, given his ability to run, and really, simply enough, just the fact that even if someone tweeted me yesterday saying like, hey, I think Miami's defense is going to be better than you were saying on the strategy show. And I said, you definitely might be right. Essentially what I'm saying, though, is that I think the offense and the offensive line will be so bad that the defense will always be on the field. And it feels like a high floor spot for Lamar Jackson for sure.
Yeah, I think the rushing ability that we talked about is a big part of it as well. But really, any sort of regression. I mean, he wasn't a bad passer under pressure last year. The thing is for him, I mean, he's not a good natural quarterback. He was actually a pretty bad passer with a clean pocket, only an 86.5 QB rating and a 67 accuracy. So accuracy is like an adjusted PFF stat where they like if you hit the receiver but he drops it, or it's like in the range and it's the receiver's fault. They do give him credit for that. And his numbers in a dirty pocket are basically the same. They're pretty much like 100% close, 79.7 QB rating and a 66% accuracy. So those numbers, those are actually good for the pressured pocket. So maybe a clean pocket against Miami will hurt him, I guess. But yeah, I think he's a safe play. It's hard for me to imagine him not getting value. Whether he has a ceiling to win a tournament, I think that's sort of questionable.
Would you run him out there naked Lamar Miller or have some interest in pairing him with one of these pass catchers? Maybe, I don't know, Mark Andrews. I think this is a tough one, man, because who is really going to inspire any confidence in you? What is Miles Boykin's role going to look like? Willie Snead the fourth, like Marcus Brown. There's so many unknowns, so many question marks in this wide receiver corps. And Mark Andrews it gained a lot of hype over the last month, but we still haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, to me, it would be Mark Andrews is probably the most obvious target to go with him. And the hope would be that he can improve there. I mean, he had 11.1 air yards per target last year, which is a nice deep number for a tight end, and 16.2 yards per catch. So he actually was kind of running with it a little more after he got those deep targets. So Andrews would be the guy I would target. I think he's actually a decent pivot to Hunter Henry. If Hunter Henry if he does go the way that I'm thinking he could, I think that's an interesting thought. But I think naked Lamar is fine. I mean, we know what he does. We know that offense is going to not give a ton of passing opportunities. So it is what it is if you run naked Lamar out there.
I like the Mark Andrews pivot. I don't have any issues with that at all. Coming in around 6% ownership, it seems to make sense to me. Especially given, like you said, Hunter Henry is going to be pretty popular. He's going to be up there with the likes of Travis Kelce. Meanwhile, by the way, I think Zach Ertz at only 10% ownership is also pretty viable. Pretty much the same reasoning as you had with George Kittle. Next one here has been a question and a thorn in the sides of anyone who has considered or has drafted Cam Newton this offseason. Is he going to have the same issues that he had last year? Pure speculation, of course. Neither of us actually know, but you have some concerning stats to back up the notion that maybe he will have some issues.
Yeah, so we saw at the end of the year, he left with that shoulder injury. Once they were out of the playoff hunt, they gave up on him. He had 7.1 air yards per target, only 2.9 attempts of 20-plus yards per game. And for an elite quarterback, usually that number is around the high fours, over 5. I mean, I think Baker Mayfield was just under 6. Josh Allen was also just under 6, which is why I love that guy. Can't be afraid to throw the deep ball. And he actually had a worse than Josh Allen QB rating of 52.1 on the deep throws last year. So that Josh Allen is a controversial player in DFS. He won a lot of leagues down the stretch last year, won some DFS tournaments last year, but he has not been a good deep ball thrower. He's been a regular deep ball thrower, and that's sort of the thing that you're targeting, the thing that I like to target. But if Cam Newton's not going to throw it deep, I think that's good for McCaffrey. I think, too, the one thing that jumped out to me, a 48.3 QB rating on pressure dropbacks. So I've always thought of Cam Newton as a guy who kind of thrives in pressure. He gets out of the pocket. He can move. That's really worrisome for me. He's got a foot injury now, too. He had this labrum injury, which, it's basketball. It's a different sport. We kind of saw that affected Paul George last year in the league, and he's going to be held out a little bit this year. It's not great for a quarterback to have a labrum injury. I have real concerns about him. And I think people are taking, the receivers on Carolina a little bit too much. Curtis Samuel's going to be really highly owned this week. I'm not buying in. I think it's McCaffrey or bust, and I really don't like Newton at all this week.
Do you think maybe the idea with Curtis Samuel is – he doesn't need to be 15 yards downfield to make an impact on receptions?
I think that probably doesn't hurt him too much. I mean, he's been a bit of a gadget player who's grown into a more of a role besides that. And he's getting targeted. I mean, he does get deeper targets than DJ Moore did. DJ Moore was getting targeted at 9.8 air yards per clip. Samuel's getting targeted at about 12. And that's still in the range where Newton's okay throwing it. It's over 20 that he really has issues. But, if I have a reason to kind of look away from a guy, and Samuel's going to be, looks like he's going to be over 20% owned based on our ownership projections right now at Awesomo.com. And that is not a spot I want to be if I don't think the quarterback is healthy. And he got surgery, so maybe it's fixed. But for week 1, I'd rather err on the side of caution. And if I have reasons to think a guy could completely falter and could also affect an offense in a way that's maybe I get an edge, I think that's sort of where I feel with it. So I'm avoiding Samuel, and I'm heavier on McCaffrey for those reasons.
Fair enough. Throw it out there. DJ Moore was actually second in the league in yards after catch per reception last year, tied there with Dante Pettis and behind only Albert Wilson. If what you're saying is accurate, or not accurate, if what you're saying comes to fruition this year, we'll need a whole lot of that from DJ Moore, and just a little bit more confidence building here. If you are a DJ Moore owner in seasonal leagues, or you like him this week, he was third in avoided tackles. So 2 stats as a wide receiver, if your quarterback is struggling to throw deep, that matter. Yards after catch and avoided tackles can take you a long way if your quarterback's only throwing 5 yards downfield. So it's worth pointing out that might help DJ Moore, it should help DJ Moore this season.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think, too, what would help now is getting Kyle Allen in there, the GOAT. He was awesome down the stretch last year. Kyle Allen is one of my – anybody named Allen at quarterback, I'm in on. That's my general rule of thumb.
I hear you, man. It just seems to work. Actually, someone in YouTube chat a minute ago said he and you are the only Josh Allen truthers out there. You have not met Ben Rossa then, let me tell you that much. Ben
It's
Roethlisberger's
true.
on the Allen train for sure.
And a guy I also love. So I'm glad it's all the people I respect the most out there, the random YouTubers and Ben Roethlisberger.
All right, last one. Is Nick Foles actually good? By the way, I'm reading what you wrote, and I love it because we're getting straight to the point here. And does that make him a viable addition or pivot to a likely chalky Leonard Fournette in a potential high-scoring game versus the Chiefs? Now, let's be clear. Right now, it's showing that Fournette will be popular, but not as chalky as either you and I had anticipated. That could change, and we'll see what ownership looks like throughout the week. But I'm not a huge believer in Nick Foles on this Jacksonville Jaguars team. I don't know he has enough weapons in the passing game. And they're going to need to keep him upright because with a clean pocket, like you said, with most quarterbacks, but he is so much better, or at least he was last season. What are your thoughts on, oh wait, you know what? Go ahead. Are you saying he had a 91 QB rating when pressured?
Yeah. So he was one of those guys who's
That's actually way better than I thought.
Yeah, 91 QB rating, 69.4% accuracy when pressured. When not pressured, he had 81.4% accuracy. The QB rating wasn't quite as good, but that's a little bit out of his control. If he's accurate, that's fine. That's what you're looking for because QB ratings can kind of be fungible because it's still based upon a result-based outcome. But yeah, he was better than Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, and Baker Mayfield in both of those categories last year. And these are all guys. I mean, Andrew Luck, obviously not a guy unless you're playing him at pitcher, then you have him in there. But otherwise, he's not a guy we're considering. But Jameis Winston, Baker Mayfield, these are guys people are touting a ton. And Nick Foles, the Jaguars have had a conservative offense, but they've also had Blake Bortles at quarterback. And I think he has a shot here at having a week. Like, I don't know that it's one I would bank my life on, but I was shocked seeing these numbers from him last year. And it's in Philly, and they have a great offensive line, as we talked about earlier. But I think this is a spot where he really could be a difference maker if Fournette does falter, or if he just like the addition to Fournette and like Dede Westbrook has a big day, or like whoever else they have. I mean, you can put anybody in there really at this point, but Dede's the one I would think would be the one to target in the stack. But yeah, like I think he could be an addition that has a lot of potential. And if the Chiefs are scoring, which, the Jags defense could be due for some positive regression, I like this spot for Foles, and I'm intrigued by him. And I think he could be that random, like, week one millionaire maker quarterback where, like, oh, it was so obvious he's playing the Chiefs. And then people are just like, this didn't play him.
Yeah, I tell you this much. I'm shocked by those numbers from Nick Foles last season.
He had an overall 72.3% completion rate. Yeah. So that's like all his passes. He was like throwing passes well, which is shocking to me because you think he's like an incompetent kind of like, oh, we'll turn it over here and there guy. And that's has been his rep. But sometimes you have to have the data. I mean, that's why we use so much data at Awesomo.com is because you have to challenge the eye test, challenge the kind of the rumors and the stuff and the things that people talk about and things that we just file away is like, oh, that's just how it is.
Oh, yeah, totally guilty of that on my part with that one. I would love to know what his pressure per dropbacks was. If he was pressured a lot, or if he was looking at it, though, it looks like it's pretty much on par with the rest of the league in terms of how often he was pressured. Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive. And then I think you also have to keep in mind how much of his teammates are influencing his accuracy, meaning if you have Ertz and Alshon and a number of bodies that are capable of bailing you out of trouble, that always helps. Do you like somebody like Dede Westbrook this week, who has been starting to gain a little bit of hype as we draw closer to the season? He's $4,800 on Draftkings. Not bad at all. On Fanduel, you've got Dede Westbrook at 59, and then on Yahoo, Dede comes in at 15, which is pretty respectable.
So this is one thing that Alex taught me on the contrary last year, which is if you see ownership for the targets and for the peripheral players in an offense, but not for the quarterback, that could be a good quarterback to target. So actually, I'll test this theory this week, and I'll bring it up with him when we do the show on Friday on the YouTube channel. So subscribe, hit that notification bell. We go live on Friday.
And like the video, and like that video if you enjoy it and want to see more, because we appreciate you and it helps support us quite a bit. Go ahead, Spag.
Yeah. Please hit that like button, guys, because this data is only going to be accurate if you hit that like button. That's this is Lofty and my first show together, so please support this monumental moment. But yeah, Foles at 2% ownership with a decent projection on him, and again, these numbers which back him out. With Westbrook as the target, I mean, Westbrook is going to have some ownership, it looks like, but he's the intermediate target. That's what his game has been. He's been a guy who can handle a lot of targets, which I think is great to see. Keelan Cole last year was a guy who I think had a little hype on him, kind of fell backwards. And Marquise Lee, actually, is Lee healthy? Is he ready to go for week one?
Who is that? Who? Lee?
Marquise Lee.
Last I saw, Lee was, let's see here. I'll pull it up while you do it, because I don't
Yeah.
remember what I read last time.
He returned to practice. I mean, I would assume he's close to going. And the first thing that comes up is a Google News article that says, "Don't start Marquise Lee in week 1."
Yeah, there's another that says Marcus Lee is a great DFS value on Fanduel and Draftkings.
There you go. That nice double speak. That's what we got to do as touts on any site out
Double speak.
But yeah, I think Dede Westbrook is a target to want. And I think going to Foles here, if we have ownership on Fournette, we have ownership on Westbrook. It's logical to go to Foles as the quarterback. He's cheap. And again, these numbers really are jarring. I had the same supposition where I'm like, oh, Foles sucks. They signed him to a stupid contract. Maybe the Jaguars are smart. Maybe that's, AEW is doing well. So they got the wrestling company. That's football team's going to rise to the tide.
It could be the case. You know what? If Nick Foles goes out there and has a monster game, it's going to be, well, number one, what does it do to Leonard Fournette? It might not even matter, though, if this Jaguars team can keep pace. What I mean by this is they're not nearly as big a dogs as I thought they would be. I understand they're at home, but I thought they would be much bigger dogs against the Kansas City Chiefs. Only 3.5 points, Spags, with a 52.5 point total. That's the highest of any game on this slate. And they also have a very respectable implied total of 24.5 points themselves. So it's not unthinkable that, and I'm not saying you roster the entire Jags team at all, but it's not crazy that, say, Foles and Westbrook have a decent game and Fournette also has a big game, because the only way you're beating Kansas City is if you can keep pace in terms of scoring, unless, of course, they find a way to shut down Mahomes with a pretty good defense. But Vegas doesn't have it that way.
Yeah, I mean, somebody in the chat just said, like, the way the Jacksonville Jaguars win is a 24-21 game. I feel like that's probably it. I think they do have a little more scoring upside for Jacksonville. I mean, they seem like they are motivated to make the offense better. And I think that's probably a good sign. But, it's still speculative. It's still week 1. We don't know. But there's not much ownership on Foles, and I think it's worth the dice roll, because you're going to have to score. You're going to have to score against the Chiefs. Even if you give up, less touchdowns, they're projected for 28 points, the highest number on the slate. It's a lot of implied points for Kansas City. And I think Jacksonville's got a shot, a home opener, a team who's kind of down from last year, who wants to show this is a new year. I think it's a really nice spot with all the narratives and the data.
I would have agreed with that commenter even, a couple of weeks ago, but I was really shocked by the over-under on this game. I was. I know that Patrick Mahomes was outstanding last year. I know that this offense was a fine-tuned machine, but it seems that Jacksonville's defense isn't getting a ton of respect, but their offense is, at least given the total and their implied total. It'll be fun to see how this one works out. But like you said, I don't think it's a stay-away spot for the pass catchers. And I don't know, maybe even Nick Foles has a phenomenal debut with the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, we're about to head out. Before we do, if you guys have any questions, hit us with those questions in the YouTube chat and we will knock them out. Spag specifically will knock them out, while I quickly mentioned that Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is the sponsor of the Deeper Dive. And if you haven't signed up yet, you're doing it wrong. Honestly, the best place to put your money this week is in Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. They got the $1 Million Baller, 0 management fee. Everything that we put into it comes back out to us. A ton of entries remaining. It's 25 to enter, 100K to first, 10 entry max. All of these contests, none of them are MME. None of them are 150 max. 10 entry max, so you're not going up against the juggernauts of the DFS world, and you have a legitimate chance to win some really good money without, in clean competition here. 10 entries, you can put in one and it still won't be that bad. The $1 entry as well, 25K, 4K to first. They got a monster free roll running throughout the entirety of the season, paying out big money to the top guys at the end of it. I don't know, Spags, there's a whole lot of reasons to play on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports this week, for sure. And you can sign up through us.
Yeah, I mean, Yahoo Fantasy, the thing with that to me that's always jumped out is, you have the 10 entry max for most of the tournaments. You have no CSV entry. So you're kind of limiting some of the sharks that will come into the water, the guys who are just, kind of doing the crunching thing, which is a valuable, viable approach as well. And I think people kind of do talk smack about that often. But
no, it's the best way to win money, hands down.
Yes.
But it's nice if you don't want to do that or don't have the time.
And especially for football, like I enjoy hand building lineups for football. I feel like there's kind of a craftsmanship to it. I still use projections as my jumping off point. I still kind of build around that as the genesis of it. But for Yahoo, you're all kind of combining the data. You're building by hand, so it evens the playing field. You're playing against some less sharp people. A lot of people who are in office leagues on Yahoo see an ad and they're like, "Oh, let me go in there," and you're getting much dumber money than you're getting on Draftkings or Fanduel or these other sites out there who are great as well in what they do. But Yahoo is a very unique advantage out there, so I would take advantage of it and use our promo code Awesomo.
Yeah. Use promo code Awesomo or sign up through the link at awesomo.com. It is on the Spotlight Hitters. Just go to the MLB tab. I can try and post it in chat right now. But otherwise, go to the MLB tab, click on articles. It's right there at the top. Spotlight Hitters, totally free. And the article or the link for the Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is right there at the beginning of the article. You get $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points when you sign up and deposit. And that is as good as money to be played on the site and to win real cash on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the sponsor of the Strategy Show. All right, Spags, before we head out, is there anything that you see from ownership? And I know we didn't do a complete deep dive in ownership. We kind of explored it as we went along. Is there anything other than Fournette that has you scratching your head and you think can be exploited in week one?
So this is a tough one because I was going to go on the other side of the equation for it initially. Arizona going against Detroit and Kyler Murray's ownership. I thought he was going to be chalkier than he ended up being, or he currently projects to be. We have been under 10% ownership. And I was ready to go with the Detroit defense against him because I think the defense has made some big signings there, which are going to help him out, improve the defensive line appreciably. And they actually weren't a terrible defense last year, at least in terms of run defense. They got no pass rush, but that's an area that they did try to improve in the offseason. So I was ready to go to Detroit, but if Kyler Murray is going to be under 10% owned and the highest owned guy on that roster is going to be David Johnson at 11%, I think stacking Arizona could be an interesting move here because we've talked about all the improvements all offseason. Everybody in the media has talked about them. And I think if they are going to be low owned, then it's a good play. If they're higher owned, I think it's one where I would have probably avoided and even taken the defense. But the ownership right now, a Murray, Christian Kirk stack. Christian Kirk, a very elusive guy, had really good breakaway moments last year, had a good yards per route number, and now is with Josh Rosen throwing him, who is not good. We now know he's officially not good. He can't start over Ryan Fitzpatrick. So there's a lot that intrigues me about Arizona, and I think I'll have some more of them in the field. All
right, you want to take a couple questions before we head out?
Yeah, I was taking some in the chat. People seem to be curious about Devonta Freeman. He's a guy who I think people will see some value in today. And of course, see that high team total for the matchup overall between Atlanta and Minnesota. How are you feeling about Freeman? Because he's going to be pretty low owned. Not a great projection on him, though, it looks like. But he is going to be low owned and reasonably priced.
Yeah, here's where I'm at on Freeman. I understand it at that price point. I totally do. But I just don't know if it's worth saving the extra few $100s on Freeman in lieu of Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette. And even I think Nick Chubb is an interesting option just based on what I project to be a pretty heavy time of possession game for the Cleveland Browns. So for me, I don't have an issue with Freeman because I do think as far as his salary goes, it makes him a viable option. But above him and a couple below him have me putting him in that no man's land where I can't really fall in love with him there either.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the Minnesota defense, we talked about it earlier, I think they're good enough where I'm not dying for it. But I think they should see an uptick in volume. I think for over the year and for season long, especially, I think Freeman is a pretty good investment. The injury concern is always a thing with him, but this Atlanta offense should only get better. They were better than it seemed last year with Steve Sarkisian, who, I'm sure he was taking hits of the flask in between. Sorry, I should make that joke. But as a USC fan, it really that was a real kick in the nards what he did to our team. But it is a spot for Freeman where I think on the year he may have some better days. And I don't hate him in week one. I mean, taking a team going against a defense who looks on paper good, that has had good offensive potential, is a tournament approach that wins people money very often. And I think this is one with the Falcons ownership not being high for anybody besides Julio. They go into Freeman, and this could be a team too. You stack them up and maybe you get there.
All right. XTJ asks, are Fournette, or actually he asked and someone else asked about Fournette and Lockett. Fournette and Lockett cash viable? Yes, absolutely. They're cash viable. I expect both of them to have quite a bit of ownership here. Here's another one. A couple questions from more than one person on TJ Hawkinson.
Yes.
He is discounted. I know people liked what they saw from him in the preseason, but temper your expectations. especially given Ebron's lack of production for years there before he went to Indy. But, that's only one guy. What are your thoughts on Hawkinson here at a, relatively shallow tight end position?
I think in terms of talent, he grades out well, but he kind of screams a little bit of Mike Gesicki last year. People are trying to get the hot young rookie tight end in there, and they want to believe that he's going to be Kittle. They want to believe he's going to be Ertz. Just play Kittle and Ertz. Like, just pay up at tight end. Like, I think that's to me is what the move is. I think people get too cute at tight end, myself included. My penchant last year, like, I played way too many 2 tight end lineups because I'm like, oh, these guys are cheap and he's got upside. And they never do. And that's, that's an anecdotal thing, but data wise too, I think it does back it up. There's a really big discrepancy between top tight ends and cheap tight ends. There really isn't also a big lack of targets to go there. Like, who left that you're worried about filling the roles of Golden Tate, but he was out from a lot of the stretch last year as well. And then also Danny Amendola's in there as well in the slot. So I think there's enough to siphon it away. Kerryon Johnson should be more involved in the pass game this year. Like, I would not want to bank on him at 1% ownership. You want to go there? Sure, which is what he's projected for, but not a dude who I would go like, oh, he's going to grade out and he's going to be a monster, because I just don't see Matt Stafford really targeted. You got Galladay, you have Amendola, you still have Marvin Jones, you have Kerryon Johnson needing more of a load. That's a lot of mouths to feed in offense for a rookie.
No, I'm with you 100%. Primetime says, anyone think Miles Sanders will get enough volume to hit value at 3,600 on DraftKings? Look, I don't have the answer to that, Spags, but what I can tell you is that if Devin Singletary is going to have significant ownership, and I don't know if he will, Singletary at only 4%. So that changes things for me. I got a decent amount of him in crunches. Miles Sanders at 2%, 3,600, by the way. Do you think he gets enough volume? I personally think it's going to be split between him and Jordan Howard, with maybe Clement sparingly mixed in. But I think it'll be a two-headed monster here in Philly. I just don't know if it's worth going to in week 1.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things for you with Philly. Like, I like Philly here. I think the passing game in particular interests me a bit, because you have a reasonably priced and not too highly owned Carson Wentz. Alshon Jeffrey, who, is kind of hampered by injuries to start the year last year. I think he's a guy who can be viable again this year. And Ertz, we talked about as well. Again, another tight end advantage guy who's actually just getting targets and has had a great rapport with Wentz over the years. But I agree. Like, I'm not dying for Sanders. Honestly, I'm not dying for Sanders or Singletary, because I think you just, again, have like a very crowded backfield there. These guys probably don't have the upside right away. It wouldn't shock me if like Sanders had a couple monster breakaway plays. Singletary was more of a load carrying back. He wasn't a crazy spark athlete in college. So I'm not sure that he's going to be the guy people seem to think he's going to be. And I also think in that offense, Frank Gore is going to get touches. I think TJ Yeldon's going to get some pass work and some touches. And he's actually been pretty good when he's actually gotten a shot to do things. So I'm not as into the rookies this year. And, I think one of my main lessons as somebody who's now done like the full year of analysis work, and especially talking to Alex every week, a lot of our tendencies as like players in fantasy football, when you're kind of a casual player or just like even a person who knows a lot, you tend to want to get cute and go to these rookies and guys who have an unproven workload. And for week 1, week 2, week 3 especially, that is a big risk. And that's a risk I would only take at low volume.
No question, man. People took some serious hits on that with guys like Royce Freeman last year, Rashad Penny. You see it quite a bit. Certain guys, you just know it's going to be all right, like a Saquon Barkley. What about Devin Singletary? We had a question in chat about Singletary. Where do you stand on him this week, knowing that this is projected to be a low-scoring game, and I really just don't know how efficient this Buffalo offense is going to be?
I like Buffalo a little more, but I think the Jets defense is good enough last year that it spooks me a bit. According to PFF, they graded out extremely well. One of the better run defenses. Overall, one of the better defenses, a decent coverage defense. I like, look, Josh Allen is a guy I will hold that torch, and this week I will probably not be playing him because I think the Jets are kind of slog this out a little more. And Adam Gase, he's not a great coach in my estimation, so maybe he makes things appreciably worse compared to Todd Bowles, who was a defensive-focused coach before. But it's still, I'm not dying for these guys in week 1. And that backfield, even without McCoy, I just think there's enough guys to split touches. This is a time where you want to give Frank Gore more of a load. I don't think you just go in and give Singletary a bunch. So, I think this is a stay away game for me overall, because I just don't see it being a hyper high scoring game compared to some of these other ones we have.
All right. Last one here, and then we'll get out. Twitter at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D, and at Chris Spags. Hit us up, give us a follow. And if you have any questions that we weren't able to answer, be happy to help you out on Twitter. Or if you are a subscriber at Awesomo, head into our Slack chat, premium Slack chat, and we'll talk. So last one here, kind of a two-part question. Someone asked, does new Titans offensive coordinator want to ground and pound or test Mariota's arm? I could tell you that if Derrick Henry is healthy, I don't see any reason they wouldn't want to lean on the ground with Henry. It doesn't mean they won't. It doesn't mean that Mariota is going to throw 15 times a game. It just means that in terms of balance, you're going to see more run than pass, as you should. And what do you think about the Titans pass catchers this week, Spags? He said they should have to keep up with the they should try and keep up with the Browns, but you're right. They likely will have to. I don't know. They should be playing from behind. I'm not as high on the dude. I think the Browns could be a little bit underwhelming to get started off just because of how hyped up they are. Maybe I'm wrong. Kind of anecdotal, but the hype is insane on this team right now. Wouldn't be surprised if this is a very close football game between the Titans and Browns.
I agree with that pretty fully as well. I think the Tennessee defense last year was actually better than people give it credit for. And this is not a data point. This is just a me talking out my ass point. But I like a coach who's a linebacker who's come from like a competent
team. Can you look at your dog real quick? Oh man. She was.
There's window washers outside. So like there was banging on my window. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Just apparently washing the windows.
Dude, she was turned on her side though. And it looked like she was walking on the side of the couch.
Oh, Penny, yeah, that's how she likes to sleep. She likes to hand it up for some extra attention, but also big on the Browns as a dog. So that's part of
nice. Sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, it's all good. So yeah, Tennessee's defense, I think, was actually pretty good last year. They graded out really well according to PFF. They also did a really good job in the red zone, which to me is a signifier of a strong defense. If you're not bending or breaking in the red zone, that's kind of a good sign for you up and down the field. And last year too, I mean, granted, they did change offensive coordinators. Matt LaFleur is now out of town, but I think the tight ends coach, I think it's Arthur or something, is now their offensive coordinator. But they had a really slow pace last year, 29.5 seconds per snap. They also did a decent job of possessing the ball, just under 30 minutes of time possession per game. So to me, I think they're going to try to slow this one down. They're going to cover Cleveland well. I'm not so into these guys, and it seems like the field's not crazy into Cleveland in week one either. So that's actually a bit of a surprise to me. But overall, though, I still think it's going to be a tougher spot for Cleveland in week one. I think they're a team that could falter week one, and you go to them in week two in a better matchup.
Yep, no question. I think the Titans will be a decent enough team. And by the way, somebody mentioned last week yesterday, I had said that I think their biggest issue is going to be, can they stop this defensive line for the Cleveland Browns? Someone mentioned that PFF had them ranked with the 4th overall offensive line heading into 2019. Now, you're not wrong, but that was before Taylor Lewan went out with that suspension. You lose him at left tackle, Spags. That is a massive loss, especially going up against some quality edge rushers. What are your thoughts here on the offensive line for the Titans? Can they hold up?
I think they can. I think they're a team. I mean, they're committed to that sort of approach. I'm not as big of a Derrick Henry guy overall, and I do think there is some potential here for the pass game because like Mariota's not a guy that I like, but I think Corey Davis is a high target guy who's shown the ability to kind of carry a lot of targets. Having Adam Humphries out there now is going to take some of that attention away because he's a big upgrade on the Taywan Taylors of the world and those guys they had in the mix last year. But I think the line's a decent one. I think it's one where they can do kind of the 3 yards in a cloud of dust approach, which they did last year. And then sometimes Derrick Henry will break one. Sometimes Dion Lewis will break one, even though he didn't do that much last year. I think that's sort of the approach they want to have. They want to get into pitchers' duels every game. I think they're going to bring that approach today. And I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, Cleveland's defense really wasn't that good last year. And I don't think they've made any major improvements overall. I mean, in terms of grades for PFF, they graded out pretty poorly in every category, even though they got decent results. And I'm not sold overall that they're going to be a good defense this year. So I think Tennessee, I should have no problem controlling the ball, at least from what I said.
Well, that hour and a half flew by, man.
Yeah, this was fun. This was we prepared so much and we really didn't even have to.
I know. We wouldn't have to do shit at all. Hour and a half in the books. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always. It's going to be a really fun season. If you enjoy the show, you want to see more, and you want to help support all of us at Awesomo.com, hit us with the thumbs up, like the video. It's very simple. It just takes maybe half a second to do, and we are grateful. Tomorrow, I'll be back with Sal Vetri breaking these games down, game-by-game breakdown on the NFL Strategy Show. First one of the year. Going to get into the weeds, and then we'll close it out. Manny and Chris Randone on Friday will take you into the weekend. Spags, any last words before we're out for the morning?
No, it's been great doing this with you, Lofty. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to do a show together. I'm glad to do these every Wednesday moving forward. And check out my videos on the channel. I'm doing a video breakdown, a very fast one. Same thing I do for MLB, for the NFL rankings that Awesomo puts out there. Actually doing a top 5 list based on Awesomo's suggestion. So if it sucks, you can blame him. It's not my fault ever. But doing that today. So check those out on the channel. Those are very short burst ones. Some of the information I bring here, going to bring those to those videos, but just check out everything on the channel. We're putting out a lot of new NFL content this year, and support means a ton. So hit that like button and keep coming back.
All right. And by the way, those videos are awesome. I mentioned it to you yesterday. I don't know how you can cram so much into a 5-minute video, but you did. And it came out great. So check them out. And you know what? If you're just looking for some quick information and you don't have the hour and a half at that time of the day, you're out on a smoke break, you're eating lunch at work, dude, perfect videos to check out for sure. So go ahead and do that. Until the next time, we'll see you back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Myself, Dave Lochran, and Sal Vetra will be with you. That's Chris Spags. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Strategy Show.